Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Habari, Ibolachi, Karibu sana, Akwaba, Sanbonani. Thank you for joining us wherever you are in the world for this very exciting session on how marketing can be used as a lever to drive the SDGs and Agenda 2363 aspirations through what we call humanized growth. My name is Andisa Nsubane, and I'm deeply humbled to be your navigator for this session. A very warm welcome to this beautiful continent of Africa. I'm really excited and looking forward to an amazing engagement with this incredibly insightful and experienced panel of thought leaders from the Institute of Real Growth, Distel Group Holdings, Wyndham & Thompson, and Safaricom as we unpack this very important topic and share ideas on how we, as marketers, brand activists, and growth leaders can play a more meaningful role in supporting the UNGC's Africa strategy. The Institute for Real Growth, otherwise known as the RRG, is partnering with the UNGC to help chief marketing officers and other senior leaders drive more humanized growth for their organizations. I myself am a graduate of this flagship RRG 100 program, as is every other participant on this panel. And today, I'm extremely proud and excited to be joined by one of the Institute's founders, Mark Swan-Arons. Mark, you're most welcome.
Thank you, Andisa. And I have to correct you because I think you're being a little too humble there. You're not just a facilitator, you're also the marketing leader and the strategy executive at All Mutual Limited. But perhaps more importantly, in this IRG context, you're also the IRG Humanized Growth Champion of 2021, and I believe the African Marketing Leader of 2021. So I think that explains all the trophies in your background.
Oh, thanks a lot, Mark. Now, I'm deeply humbled to have been afforded the opportunity to be a part of the program, but also recognized by my peers as the leader for this year. And it's certainly something I don't take lightly. No, I happen to also have been appointed to the board of Cricket South Africa, and we have a strategy session in Kimberley today. And that's why I'm here, and you see the trophy. I'm sitting here at the stadium in Kimberley. So really grateful for the opportunity to join you from this beautiful place. So on that note, Mark, and maybe to kick us off and give us a global perspective, just talk to us a little bit about humanized growth. What is humanized growth and why is it so important?
Well, thank you for asking, Andisa. And indeed, it is at the core of everything we do at the Institute for Real Growth, because we conducted a major growth study. In fact, it was the world's largest growth study. We interviewed over 750 CEOs and CMOs, and we have a quant response of over 5,000, looking at two things. One, what distinguishes overperforming organizations from underperforming growth organizations, and two, the role of the marketers within those organizations. All the work that the Institute for Real Growth does has a backbone to it that comes straight from the growth study. This is a study which we think is the largest study done to look into business growth and the role of marketing over the last few years. Over 750 CEOs and CMOs have participated, and the quant database is over 5,000 people. In the growth study, we looked at the differences between over and underperforming organizations, and we looked at the differences in the role that marketing played in those organizations. The growth study results showed that overperforming growth organizations focused not just on shareholder growth, they focused on multi-stakeholder growth, value creation for the colleagues, the customer, the community, and the capital markets, not just the shareholder. The growth study also showed that marketers in overperforming organizations weren't losing influence, they were gaining it, because they were partnering with their C-suite peers to develop value propositions and an understanding of the unmet needs of all the new stakeholders. Think, for example, about the CMO collaborating with the head of HR to understand the unmet needs of the colleagues and to develop a value proposition, the employee brand. That's what we call humanized growth. And the marketer can play a very important role in helping an organization make the shift from shareholder primacy to multi-stakeholder value creation.
I'm also extremely excited to welcome Tseho Chukwudzwane, Group Chief Strategy Officer at Wyndham & Thompson. Tseho has a formidable reputation as a strategic marketer and works with brands and leaders to unlock human-centric growth across the African continent. Tseho, welcome.
Thank you, Andisa.
Tseho, so given what you now know about the UNGC and the Africa strategy, what do you believe organizations and brands can do to support the aspirations for Africa as articulated in Agenda 2063?
So to me, the African Union Agenda 2063 is really about collective impact, with business playing a very important and active role within that. It's about the transformation of the African continent, recognizing the potential that exists, and bringing together organizations, big and small, to actually unlock this potential in a way that is sustainable, responsible, as well as inclusive. So that's the ambition on the one hand. On the other hand, we have to think about what is happening within the brand space. So brand purpose, has commonly been accepted and recognized as a business imperative. With businesses finally accepting that purpose makes good business sense. Purpose is actually good for business. And I think then there's an opportunity for brands to really challenge their respective organizations to consider the purpose opportunity more broadly. What I mean by more broadly is that not only is it important for brands to make a positive impact in people's lives, it is also important, and it's an expectation, that brands impact the world within which those people live. And so this is where, for me, the two come together, right? So the desire for brands to drive purpose-driven growth can actually support this Africa growth ambition, that is articulated in Agenda 2063. Practically speaking, the shape and size of that support will vary based on a number of contributing factors. But the principle remains that brands can authentically align their purpose agenda to the Sustainable Development Goals, in turn making a meaningful difference, championing what truly matters to their customers.
It now gives me great joy to introduce and welcome Donovan Hegland, Director, Growth and Innovation at Distel Group Holdings. With extensive experience working across the continent, Donovan is focused on driving transformational strategy, leading the health and profitability of the brand portfolio, breakout innovation, digital transformation, and marketing capability development for the group. Donovan, welcome.
Thank you, Andisa.
So, what do you believe is the role of the CMO in helping organizations drive more humanized growth?
Thanks, Andisa. I think when talking about the topic and that role of CMOs in helping companies drive more humanized growth, I think there's two things to recognize and realize. First up is, firstly, CMOs are, I think, uniquely positioned and armed with foresights and insights that the rest of the organization doesn't get to sit and look at every day. So they are better armed with what humans want and expect in time to come. And the second piece, I think, is realize that you can't do it alone. Although being the owner of the brands in an organization does allow you to accelerate elements like humanized growth in the communication and the engagement platforms and programs on your brands, you really can't do it alone. And if you can't do it alone, the key then is to get a broader cohort of senior leaders and senior teams in the organization to see what you see. Often CMOs live in a world of believing is seeing, so they see the foresight and they believe it, whereas many other parts of the organization are living in a world of seeing is believing. They want to see it happen first before they believe that it's going to come. So, I think we need to focus on helping others see and understand what the CMOs themselves are seeing, focus on really understanding and unpacking what humanized growth means. And that process is about shifting a belief system in leadership teams and organizations. And it's shifting a belief system and a philosophy to really believe that growth in future comes from humanized growth, which comes from the creation of shared value. And it comes from making sure that everybody grows across shareholders and communities, the consumers, the customers, your employees, and everybody is sharing in that growth over time. So I guess in a nutshell, focus firstly on one, rallying other senior leaders when you go on the journey. Two, I think understand the phase that you're in as an organization. If you take a spectrum on the one hand of just basic understanding of the SDGs and the and ESG, so sitting in that compliance risk management space, to kind of in the middle being, looking at, exploring areas for shared value creation, to on the far other end of the spectrum, being in that real, truly regenerative, collective impact and value creation happening through networks. Just understand where you are in that continuum so that you speak a similar language to the rest of the people in the organization. And then lastly, invest in skills, and in particular topics like human-centered design. And there's no better place than starting within the marketing teams to do that.
Amazing. Thank you. So next, I'm really excited at welcoming Sylvia Molinge. She's the Chief Customer Officer at Safaricom, responsible for leading all customer centricity and business growth efforts for the group. With Safaricom being one of the brands that is the epitome of being able to solve customer pain points through innovation, there certainly is much to learn from Sylvia. And Sylvia, it's a pleasure having you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
All right, so let's bring you in here. So what do you think brands can do to help their organizations contribute towards delivering the SDGs and Agenda 2063?
Thank you. And this is something that I am really very passionate about, and one of the reasons why I have made a personal commitment to make sure that I work for organizations that are very purpose-led and that have embedded the SDGs as part of their purpose and their everyday mission. Why is this important? It's because I believe that organizations exist to serve customers, and you cannot have organizations that exist or that are growing in a society that is failing. When you look at what the SDGs embrace, they embrace all the things that we need to be paying attention to as humanity in order to ensure that we get the world moving in the right direction and ensuring that nobody gets left behind. There is no way any organization can hope to have sustainable long-term market share growth if they are not paying attention to the things that are ailing and affecting the society in which they are serving. That's why I believe that brands that have a purpose that is connected to the communities that they're in, brands that have a purpose that is connected to the countries that they live in, will have a longer kind of a sustainable growth trajectory than those that don't. Because at the end of the day, also consumers are not fools. They can tell whether you are there for them, whether you're there to have a long-term relationship, or you're there just because you want to have a transactional relationship. You cannot have a long-term relationship if it's not embedded on purpose. And SDGs are the best way that we can actually be able to capture the real meaning and the real value that we as corporates can actually be able to bring in into society. Because when we build strong societies, we build strong consumers, and those strong consumers then build strong brands. So the two are interconnected. They cannot be considered to be separate.
Amazing. Thank you so much for those insights. Now, Tsecho, as someone involved in unearthing deep insights for many clients, I'm very interested to the answer to this question. We hear a lot about the concept of universal human truths. Now, given this concept, are there things that are unique to the continent of Africa that you believe are the truths that must be taken into consideration when developing strategies for Africa?
So Andisa, I do buy into the concept of universal human truths, right? So just to use an example, so to me, the SDGs, for example, if I were to refer to them in marketing language, I would say the SDGs are like a market map of the most pressing issues that are important to humanity today. So in that sense, SDGs are actually based on universal truth, right? And so if you're looking to impact humanity, what better place to start than to make an impact where it's really needed? However, these do not impact all of humanity in the same way and at the same time. Some are more critical and more urgent in some markets, and indeed in some segments than others. And not only that, human beings are ever changing, right? And culture is ever evolving, which means that our development strategies, in order for them to work, they would really be, they would need to be rooted in two truths, which are the fact that as a continent, we are very diverse. So we are a diverse continent. What is needed to impact and contribute to something like gender equality, for example, in Ghana, will be very different to what is needed to impact and contribute to gender equality in a rural, South African setting. And because culture is always evolving, how you do that also, has to be insight-led. To give you a simple example that is personal to me, growing up in rural South Africa as a young girl, people were not out here talking about sanitary pads and good menstrual hygiene. That was taboo, right, in those days. But thank God and thank goodness for brands like Kotex and brands like Always for actually going on the journey of rallying us around necessary conversations and facilitating important engagements around this issue. Today, we're not only talking about menstrual health, we're actually joining movements that are making an impact, in the lives of young South Africans, young Africans, and communities, across the continent. So I say that to make the point that staying in touch with how things are evolving, but also leading that conversation, right? So I can imagine that at the time when these brands were starting the journey, this was still taboo, but they went ahead, and thank goodness that they did.
So Donovan, it's quite fortuitous that the theme of this event is uniting business in Africa. One thing that is clear, having gone through the experience of COVID-19, is that organizations and brands can no longer do it alone. What are your thoughts about strategic partnerships, and what learnings can you share about collaborating with others to support social impact across the continent?
Thanks, Indisa. And yes, absolutely. I think partnerships and networks are absolutely key to creating, not only social impact, but also impact on overall levels of growth throughout an economy. So what I mean by the social impact, should be seen in the full context of shared value, and hence growth for all stakeholders. Seeking opportunities and partnerships for social impact is no longer only about the old CSI and CSR initiatives. I think they do have some kind of space and have a role somewhere, but the true unlock and the scale for overall impact is about growth for all stakeholders, which makes it sustainable and continuous, as opposed to when there's money and there's budgets available, then you've got money to create social impact. It shouldn't be like that. It should be a continuous process and part of business. I think the other point is, one really needs to make sure that in your partner networks is make sure you seek opportunities throughout the entire value chains, not only your own value chain, but the value chains that knock on into your partner networks as well. Right from sourcing on the one end and procurement through to your engagement to your consumers and customers on the other, and the feedback loop. There's opportunities throughout all those areas to really go about creating social impact, but also growth for all stakeholders in the equation. And the other thing to look out for, especially across the African continent, is making sure that you're looking for opportunities in that value chain or in your brand engagement that really is addressing the root causes that lie behind the SDGs, in particular topics around inequality and poverty and climate change on the African continent are absolutely critical. Yeah, so looking for those opportunities across the board, and yeah, there are a range of fantastic examples that are already taking place across the world, and particularly in Africa, for us to explore and learn from, and that's the exciting part. Just two things that come to mind is there's a particular brand whose harvest for its fruit, comes naturally out of the wildlife areas in the north of South Africa. And that is picked up off the ground by the community, and that is then brought into for processing, and then funds from that brand go back into those communities to support conservation and wildlife and tourism, which generates a knock-on impact and a circular role within that community. Another one we know about is a business that we've been involved in around that is where the women in the community run as the distribution leg for this particular business, and they drive distribution, but at the same time their families and their children and community members work in the plant, in the production environment. So the combination between that around the community impact and employment creation, as well as then the growth of that business as a result of that, is a self-fulfilling prophecy where it just continues to grow of itself as a partnership and a network that creates shared value across the board.
All right, Sylvia, back to you. What advice do you have for NGOs and other organizations that want to partner with companies and brands? What are some of the tips you have? What are the do's? What are the don'ts?
When I look at the complexity of the challenges that we have in the world today and society at large, I think it's impossible for any one organization to think that they can actually tackle and solve the problems end to end. What I have found works best is when we have a partnership model where everybody brings kind of their inch and holds their inch in terms of ensuring that they deliver toward the overall good. So partnership is key to helping us resolve the challenges that we face in the world today. Therefore, even though NGOs probably would have the understanding of the problems that society face, they need the support of corporate organizations simply because of the understanding that they have in terms of building brands, reaching consumers, getting to the market, because that then helps to amplify the messages that NGOs would have. So my advice would be, so what's important to understand is in any partnership, it has to be a win-win situation. There has to be a win for the NGO, there has to be a win for the corporate organization, and ultimately the two wins then are all focused on creating a win for the society or the consumer that we want to serve. Now, my recommendation, or if I was to give any tips, is as you go into any negotiation, it's always important to understand what is in it for the other person and frame your narrative or even the story that you're selling in the wordings or the intent that the other person then would be able to connect to. Many times, I think what normally happens with the developmental world is that they're so passionate and committed to the challenges that they seek to resolve, but they also understand that they cannot be able to do that without the partnership of the corporate or the private sector. Now, to be able to bring them on board, you have to frame a narrative in a way that also connects to what it is that they're trying to do. How does what you are trying to do as an NGO connect to what the corporate organization that you're speaking to is also trying to do? When you find that intersection of purpose, then you create magic, because then you're able to drive the achievement of what it is that you are trying to achieve on your side, and the organization is also able to kind of create a tick. That place of magic is where transformation happens.
Amazing. Creating magic to change Africa. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for those really insightful thoughts. But to wrap things off, I thought I'd ask each of you to share one final thought on what you believe marketers, brand activists, and growth leaders need to prioritize in 2022 as they seek to play a meaningful role in supporting the ambitions of the African continent and indeed the UNGC. Let's start with you, Tsecho.
Thank you, Andisa. You know, what we're talking about here, I think, requires us as a collective to stop being so overly obsessed with market share. I think we need to shift towards earning a share of life, you know, not just a share of the market that you're playing in. I think it calls for us to prioritize partnerships over competition. It means being a part of the solution. It means focusing on and working towards collective advantage and not just competitive advantage.
Well, that was really beautiful, Tseho. Thank you so much for that. Donovan, what are your thoughts?
Thanks, Andisa. I think mine is really quite short and simple, and that is really about stimulation of small and medium enterprises across the continent. They are an over-indexed sector when it comes to stimulation of employment opportunities. And I think through that creates an immense amount of additional growth across the board.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mark, I think I'll give the last word to you. Any final thoughts from your end?
Thank you, Andisa. And how rewarding to hear all these different perspectives. I think it's a real honor as the Institute for Real Growth. We work with all the regions of the world. And it's so strong to see that actually the same trends are being accelerated everywhere. What we saw pre-COVID already was that there was an increasing push to move from the traditional capitalism to more multi-stakeholder value creation. Bill Gates talked about it at the World Economic Forum, but it really sped up when BlackRock started to demand from all its companies, all the companies it invests in, that they prove how they create value for the whole community. And I think that COVID has taught all of us that from one day to the other, we had to shift our focus from the shareholder and the customer to the colleague and the community. This is an ongoing trend that has only been accelerated by COVID. Organizations everywhere are recognizing the importance of this now, and organizations everywhere need the skills of marketers to better understand all of the stakeholders. We are the window of the world, as Donovan said. We are the ones that are generically programmed to define and understand unmet needs, to listen, and to develop value propositions that in the minds of the stakeholder create value. That's why I believe this is a real call to action to marketers to step up and take responsibility. And to quote one of the frameworks in the IRG model, maybe this is marketing's ikigai. Thank you.
Amazing. A call to action indeed. And I certainly, from my perspective, I don't know about you, but I'm also tired of this Africa rising narrative. For how long have we been rising and rising and rising in Africa? I think it's now time for all of us to step up. And there's never been a more opportune moment than this for brands to deliver on their purpose and to deliver on their promise. And I think that the challenges that we have on the continent represent a wonderful opportunity for us to really accelerate the development of business models that help to address social issues. Shared value certainly must be a big priority for 2022. I thank everyone for joining us today. It's been a wonderful discussion, and I certainly do think and hope that this will be the beginning of a real collective movement to help address and support the UNGC as it drives the delivery and execution of the Africa strategy. Thank you very much, everybody. Asante sana, midasi pa. Thank you very much.